discussed what's known as sacred sphere of basic needs. This isn't really anything that's out there other than from a mythological standpoint. So we use the concept and adapted it to nutrition and our basic needs. So some of our basic needs are going to be food and water. We also need sleep, right? We need safety and shelter, and then our physical health and our mental and emotional health. Now, let me guess, all of you are challenged with this on a daily basis, especially caregivers, especially in the time of COVID, right? All these things are going to affect that. And when that sphere is disrupted, it gets unbalanced. So look at that sphere here. It's not round anymore. It doesn't roll smoothly. Life creates dents in the sphere, and it makes it challenging to balance it all, especially for us in the caregiving world. So look at the way the food and water, sleep, shelter look on top of that. It could fall over at any moment. And when you're trying to balance that, think about it as a waiter would. He's got a tray, he's holding it upright, all these things are stacked on it. If it's imbalanced, he's got to follow the momentum of where that tray is taking him. And that's a very hard hole to get out of. So we've got to take a breath, spend some time figuring out how to make this sacred sphere round again. So how does sleep impact nutrition? So if it's one of our sacred spheres, how is it impacted by nutrition? Well, we know that inadequate sleep interferes with hormones that regulate appetite. We also know it impacts our decision making. How many of you are up late at night and you're constantly thinking of things? The next day when you're sleep deprived, you don't make the best decisions. Even when it comes to food, you might not be planning things. All these things affect that. And then finally, when you're awake more, you might be increasing your impulsive desire to eat, right? Midnight snacks, cereals, anything like that. So the more waking hours we have, the more opportunities we have to eat. So that can certainly affect our nutrition. And often those aren't the best decisions that we're making. So you can see just with sleep alone, nutrition has a big impact. How about safety and shelter and nutrition? Well, what's available? Are you able to access it? As caregivers, you might not be able to go to the store as often now with the COVID crisis going on. Maybe you're having to order online. They don't always have what you need. So you don't have access to everything that you're trying to get to keep that proper nutrition for you and maybe the person that you're taking care of. It's almost impossible to get everything you need these days without actually going to the store. And then in some instances, you still aren't able to access it. How about preparation of food? If you're trying to care for a loved one, are you able to even be in the kitchen and cook something that's a little bit more nutritious? For my grandfather, he lived at home. My mom took care of him, but we had to unplug the oven. So we'd always have to just use a different method of cooking just so it would be quick and efficient to make sure we got his food. But if we left the oven plugged in, he would likely turn the knob and turn it back on. So we just left it unplugged. So all these things are going to affect the way you're able to properly prepare your food. All right, and physical health, of course, right? Your physical health, if you're not eating the right foods, you have the energy to exercise. Probably not. So it's going to be much more broader than just getting out there and exercising. If you're not eating appropriately, you might have some deficiencies in your vitamins and minerals and not be able, you're going to feel lethargic and say, hey, I'm going to skip the gym today. And then of course, it's important for disease prevention, as we're going to see later on, your overall health and especially your mood. So it's all impacted. So what does mental health have to do with nutrition? Well, nutrition can only be a piece of that puzzle. As we saw, the sphere is round. If you take everything out and just put nutrition, it's not going to flow smoothly. It's going to be a little bumpy wheel. So it's not going to have the greatest impact on your health. Your stress, depression can affect your eating habits as well. Changes in appetite, increases, decreases, just depending on your stress levels, right? I tend to not eat when I'm stressed, but I know people that will tend to overeat when they're stressed. So you might fit into one of those two categories. And then if you're using alcohol or caffeine to keep you going because of energy or trying to wind down because of stress, that's going to impact the quality of nutrition. It's going to interfere with your hunger and fullness. Then, of course, that might exacerbate some other things, such as heartburn, acid reflux, stomach ulcers, IBS, if you're not following the right nutritional plan. So it's a lot going on, right? All these are connected. This wheel has to be complete circle. Let's take a look at one of the examples for that. So if you're stressed, right, not taking care of yourself, it can result in impaired gut function, and it impacts the body in a negative way by its ability to break down and utilize nutrients. So now all of a sudden, you've got a nutrient deficiency. Well, we know those vitamins and minerals are needed in the synthesis of neurotransmitters, and those messages are carried to the brain. So everything is slowing down just simply because of this nutrition aspect. It affects everything. A diet lacking in vitamins and minerals can aggravate mood disorders for you. So what are the barriers? What are the barriers that you might have in your life? It's important to consider. Food availability, right? No better time to understand this than right now. Usually we don't have to worry about this, but now that we've got limited access to it, or maybe we don't want to go out as much, the availability is not as ready as it once was. The cost of food, right? So you've got caregivers in your home, or and it's taking up some of the budget to assist you with your loved one. That's going to affect maybe what your budget looks like in the food world. Confusion about what you should be doing, right? You often might not be able to really understand because the information that's out there, especially in social media, of what diets are out there, there's a lot of confusion on what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. And then, of course, in the caregiver world, this is especially scarce time. Time to plan, time to find the things that you really would like to fix to make things more healthy for you. And then this discomfort. Well, some people don't like vegetables. I, at one time, was one of those people. I didn't care for as many vegetables as I do now, but it's about learning how to cook them and present them in this different way. One of my favorites is green beans. I used to not like them because I grew up with a family that cooked them in a can and cooked them to death, and they just were mushy. But later on in school, I learned that I could broil them or bake them in the oven and have them nice and crispy with a little bit of olive oil, and my kids love it too. So incidentally, I do want to share a recipe later on with you guys. Ellen's going to send this presentation out to you guys, and I'll include a couple of recipes for you. All right, so these are some of the barriers. Everybody agree that that's what they have trouble with? You can nod your head, that's fine. All right, so these are all of our sacred sphere busters. So what do they look like in the nutrition world? Well, the time element might have us skipping meals, and as we'll learn later on, it's more important to eat early in the day. Some of you probably already know this. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? Well, there's science behind that. And then lunch should be fairly big as well. And as the evening comes along, maybe we should be eating a little bit smaller meal, but never skip a meal. And then another problem, and my wife really struggles with this one, she is a eating disorder counselor at LSU, and a lot of the students are looking at food as good or bad. And I think we tend to do this. We vilify food, or we put it on a pedestal, and really it should be kind of in between, as we'll see in a little bit too. So we don't want to define foods as good or bad. Maybe you just want to moderate how many of the bad foods we eat and make sure we focus on the good foods. Dehydration. How many of you drink enough water? I keep a water bottle with me all day long, and still, if I get busy or distracted, I forget to drink. So making sure you're hydrated is very important for both your mental health and your physical health as well. And mindless eating, as I discussed earlier, that is something we will tend to do as well. Just being up at night, kind of bored. If you find yourself staring at the pantry and really not knowing what to eat, odds are you're just bored. You're not really hungry. So it's very important to distinguish between the two. And then, of course, inadequate nutrition quality affects that health side as well. All right, let's look at a few more. Planning. Anybody have trouble planning this out? How about eating out? Maybe we don't have that issue right now, but it will come back when we're able to eat out a little bit more. That is a big challenge as well, because the restaurants generally don't focus just on healthy foods. They're there, but often we would prefer something else. Unmanaged hunger. That's a big one too. So going in between meals too long. So that's the importance of snacking. And how about unrealistic goals? Sometimes we'll say, oh, I'm going to go to the gym an hour a day, and then I'm going to change all my nutritional habits today. That's not really very realistic. We want to baby step this, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And as I mentioned, that lack of knowledge or misinformation that might be out there. All right, so now what? What are we going to do? How can we get wiser? Well, I think we should learn. We should learn from the blue zone. Has anybody heard of this? Nod your head yes if you have. I'm not seeing too many, but it is basically some researchers who looked at certain areas of the world where centenarians were highly concentrated. In other words, they had people who were over 100 years of age and living pretty healthy. So that is a long time to live healthiest. So it's founded by Dan Buettner. And these are several of the places around the world that he did his research. So look at this place in Greece. They live 8 years longer than Americans. They have half the rate of heart disease, and they have almost no dementia. Now that's a special place, right? I want to focus on this place in a little bit. Look at Loma, California. So it's not just in other parts of the world, it's also in this country. They live 10 years longer than North American counterparts. And then in Italy, it's the greatest concentration of male centenarians in the world. So guys that are living long. And we know in this country, we do not take care of ourselves, especially men. You can't give us, we're not going to ask for directions, right? So this is something we don't go to the doctor, but look at this population living longer. In this country, typically females live longer than males. So this is an amazing turnaround in Italy. And then look at Japan. Females over 70 with the longest lived population in the world. What are they doing to make that happen? And then in Costa Rica, twice as likely to reach a healthy 90 years of age. So those are some impressive places that they did a lot of research on to try and look and see what was going on. So let's take a little deeper dive and navigate our spheres, see if we can find some boosters for that. So what are these people doing? If we look at Greece, remember that's where dementia was the lowest. Look at their diet makeup. Vegetables, greens, fruits. That's over half of their diet is in that world. It's not anything different than what we're told already, right? So this should just be science backing up what we already know, is that we need to eat more vegetables. Look at their meat diet. 5% from meat, 6% from fish. So roughly 11% of their diet is coming from those two sources for protein. And then your legumes down there at 11%, that bumps it up to close to 22%. So that's where their diet is coming from a heavier protein side. You're going to get protein in your grains, of course. You're going to get some protein in your starchy vegetables as well, even in your pastas and some of your vegetables. That'll include some protein, but the majority of what we're talking about, meat here, is about 22% of their diet. And then look at their use of olive oil, 6%. So heavy use of olive oil. That's something that's really been talked about a while in the Mediterranean diet, and most of us use olive oil mostly because of its monounsaturated fat. So it's a really good oil to use. So this just verifies that for us. Let's try another place. Look at California, Loma Linda. Same results, right? Their diet is almost 60% fruits and vegetables. They don't eat as much fish. And it's interesting to note that this population is Seventh-day Adventists, so they have a religious background to them. A lot of religion and faith-based nutrition in this, but a lot of vegetables, 60% in vegetables, 4% in meat and poultry, and then 12% from their other protein sources that are not meat, legumes, and soy. Okay. Whole grains are in there too, at around 7%. All right, let's go back across to Italy. They do something a little bit different. Look at all the grains. 50% of their diet almost is made up of grains. Then they drink a lot of dairy. Now it typically comes from goat instead of cow. And then their vegetables are still very high. Way less in fruit though, all right? So it doesn't have to be 50% fruits and vegetables, although that's a lot of times what is gonna work for us. It can be grains too. which what do we know about grains here? We typically talk about them in a bad way. So, but it's whole grains. We want to be making sure we're using whole wheats, quinoa, and some others out there. And then if we go to Japan, this is surprising to me. Look at what they eat. Sweet potatoes. Must be a great area for sweet potato growth. But what we know is with sweet potatoes, high in a lot of vitamins and minerals. The betas are really good with that. 6% in their beans, 12% in their rice. So again, lower in meat than most other North American or Western diets. And then when we go down to Costa Rica, a little bit more of a balance there, more vegetables, grains, and fruits mixed in, right? So it's interesting to see these little areas and how well they do, but with slightly different diets. So how do we navigate that? What is our best path to mimicking some of those areas? Well, I think it starts with planting your roots. So really looking at these vegetables, making sure that we add plenty of fruit. So plant these roots on your plate. And they're really colorful. I like this picture here because it shows the rainbow, and that's really what you're trying to emulate. You want all the different colors because that's those vitamins and minerals are producing those colors. And the more of these different vitamins and minerals you have through this food, the better off you are. This isn't the Skittles rainbow, of course, but this is a true nutritional rainbow from fruits and vegetables. All right? And look at these and why we need to key on that, especially for our brains and body. Omega-3 fatty acids, that typically is going to come from your fish, but you're going to get some in your fattier vegetables like avocado. Iodine, zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, selenium, iron, B complexes, and your vitamin C. These nutrients play a role in decreasing inflammation. And what we'll learn later on is that inflammation is really the big driver for some of the health conditions we have, including dementia. Function of healthy thyroid and metabolism, your metabolic rate, and healthy digestion and your immune system all come from these vitamins and minerals. So, how can we mimic what that looks like? This is that magical question. What is the right diet, right? Well, there are 3 out there that are really tied to this. The DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet, which we all know pretty well, and the MIND diet. The MIND diet you might not know of quite as well, but it is a new one out there, probably 2015. Yeah, it's 2015 that one came out. But it's a version of the DASH and the Mediterranean diet. So let's take a look at the DASH diet. It's often referred to as the best. It's usually 1 or 2 when it comes to rating diets out there. Pennington studied it and advocates for it often. It's easier to follow. It's good for reducing inflammation. Think about blood pressure in that regard. This one's probably the primary focus was about reducing blood pressure, which we know is really a big health marker, especially for strokes, which, as we'll see in a little bit, is related to dementia. It focuses on decreasing your saturated fats, cholesterol, and also sodium. And then it's going to increase your minerals, protein, and fiber. All right, and I've got a link to you there. So when I send this to Ellen, you should be able to go to that link from the Pennington website, and it's basically a 20-page document on how to follow the DASH diet. So we won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but I do want to make sure that these diets are forefront in your brain. This is a really good one to follow. And think about this one really more from that blood pressure standpoint. All right, the second one is that Mediterranean diet. It's often referred to as the best diet as well. So it tends to be in that 1, 2, 3 category also. And a lot of the reason why that is number 1, we're looking at health benefits, and 2, we're also looking at how easy is it to follow. We want to make sure it's easy to follow. Mayo Clinic backs this one as well. Lots of studies on this diet. It's easy to follow, as I mentioned. It's going to focus on decreased saturated fats, cholesterol, and sodium. It's going to emphasize, though, more fish, olive oil, whole grains, and guess what? Wine. Yes, alcohol can be important in this as well, in moderation. But think of this diet as more for heart disease. Okay, so we've got one that's more geared for blood pressure. This one tied in with heart disease. So when we're really thinking about a diet, maybe we can merge the best of both of those. So these are great diets to follow. I've got a link there for you too. Mayo Clinic has some great articles on that and how to follow it. And then the MIND diet. As I mentioned, it debuted in 2015, so it's relatively new. And its research is really focused on brain health, especially in post-stroke patients or victims. What we see there is that typically the more, the longer the delay in help after a stroke, the more the cognitive function of the brain declines. And that's why we probably see 20% of stroke victims ending up with dementia. So now all of a sudden we had the brain, we added the brain piece in, we had the blood pressure and also heart disease. So this is where we're going with this. We've got a combination of things that we're trying to reduce our risk of. It's very similar to the DASH and Mediterranean diet. The challenge with it is it's more limited in fruits and vegetables, and it's going to eliminate certain foods that are deemed unhealthy for the brain, right? So just with that information, you can tell it's going to be a much harder diet to follow. More information's coming out though. Look for information on this in 2021. There's a 5-year study. I think it has 600 participants who were studied to see the effect of this diet on the brain and see if it reduces the risk for dementia, also the risk for strokes. So lots of good information to be coming out next year on this one. All right. So those were our 3 diets we could look at navigating our caregiving stress. The next piece is mindful eating and intuitive eating. So the best advice I have here is to basically follow a rule of 80-20. We're looking at 80% full, all right? So don't eat till you're stuffed. The brain takes about 20 minutes to really figure out whether it's full or not. So the slower you eat, put down your fork, the better off you are at understanding this and being in touch with your body. But it's hard. Like a Mexican restaurant, you're going to go in, they're going to bring you chips right off the bat, right? And then as you're waiting for the rest of your food, you might be munching on the chips as well, just because they're in front of us. Those types of things are the pieces that are part of this mindful eating equation that we really have to watch. So making sure we kind of have our eye on the prize and figure out exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. Limit your distractions. Very common in food for people to be watching TV and distracted by about what they're actually eating. There's been studies done on people who have had bowls in front of them with soup, and one of the bowls actually had a tube connected to it that it would constantly pump soup back into the bowl. So when they distracted people, those people didn't realize how much they had actually eaten because they looked down at the bowl and saw it was full. Of course, the people whose bowl emptied realized that they were full quicker because they were engaged with what that bowl looked like. When you distract people and keep filling it with food, kind of like the chip thing, then you're going to end up with way more calories in your body. So tune into that in physical versus emotional hunger. Remember I said earlier how if you were standing in front of the pantry and just kind of looking at it, can't figure out what to eat, likely it's something else. Maybe it's thirst, maybe it's just boredom, but it's likely not true hunger, because if you're really hungry, you're going to eat just about anything. And that's a good way to look at it. So slow down when you're doing those types of things. And this is a good dietitian out there to visit. Her name is Marcy. She's got a website. I will include the link here for you. And it does require you to sign up, but it'll run you through a meditation to understand hunger cues, because we typically are disconnected with those cues. So if you have a complicated relationship to hunger, you're not alone. It will help you get clarity about how your body communicates hunger. It will help you discover what the anxiety part of this is, or guilt about hunger. And it will help you develop a greater trust around food if that's a challenge for you. All right, so what should your mindful plan look like? Spend a few minutes each evening thinking about the next day. I actually personally do it really one time, and that's Friday when I get home. Tonight, I will be thinking about what to cook for the week, because I cook for the week. My wife and I decide what we're gonna have. and we basically will get what we need and cook it either Saturday or Sunday. So that's part of my routine, is to plan what I'm going to have essentially for the week. That's next level. Not everybody does that, but when you're married to a dietitian, that's what we tend to do. Utilize menu templates. So I keep a little list. It's basically a list of the foods that we commonly eat. And so it's a nice trigger for us to go back to the well and say, oh, we hadn't had this in a while. Let's try this. Grocery shopping, you should have that planned out as well, because those items will, you don't want to have to go back to the store a bunch of times. You don't want to have to buy a bunch of different small ingredients. You just want to be able to get it all in one swoop, especially when you're worried about time. Plan your work and work your plan. And set out your alarms and reminders about what you need to do with that food, and then plan lists. So real quick, I want to show you. I bring my food, package it in a little container, and bring it every day. What do they typically say when it comes to food? Eat 5 times a day, right? Well, we don't mean have 5 meals available. What we're really talking about is trying to have little small snacks that you can have throughout the day. So breakfast, then maybe a 10 a.m. snack, lunch, afternoon snack, and then your dinner. So when I'm here at work and not knowing what the day is going to bring for me, I do the same thing. So that's lunch for me. I've already had breakfast this morning. And then I bring some yogurt, already packaged. As long as I remember to bring my spoon, I'm good. Bring my fruit as well. Usually an apple or a banana for me. It's just easier to pack to bring to work. And a snack or two. So cashews, I buy a big jar. They're expensive to buy when they're a little package. So I buy a big jar and then just put them in this little nice little container so I can work. And then this has been a life changer for me. Kind bars are amazing, but this is a brand new one. It's a smaller version of my favorite one. I don't know if y'all can see in front of the camera here. This is the dark chocolate cherry cashew. This one is 80 calories and a little small one. They do have the bigger packages, but I like these little ones just for a little snack. So cashews, dark chocolate, and cherries, you can't beat that. All right, so plan to optimize for fullness. As I said, eat a meal or a snack every 3 to 4 hours. Aim for those food groups, right? So you saw I had my fruit. I didn't show you my salad, but I have a salad in there as well. And then also my nuts and also the protein source as well. So I'm covering all the food groups in a pretty tight window there. Your nutrition quality counts, and of course, hydrate. Bring your water with you. Okay, so here are some good combinations for us. I'll send these in the presentation for you. You see, that's kind of what I've done here. It's basically included food groups. So maybe a dairy with some protein in it. For instance, that first one is mozzarella cheese with a tomato and some fresh basil. Get your herbs in there. The bottom one on the right is the almonds, banana, and some oatmeal. So these are nice, easy ways to get you some snacks in without taking a whole lot of time. So hopefully those will be useful for you as well. All right, number 3. As I mentioned earlier, this is a tricky one, right? So I don't encourage anybody to start drinking just for the sake of improving their health. That's not how this one works. But if you already are drinking in moderation, of course, then you should continue drinking, especially wine, especially red wine. I listed the servings of alcohol here for you so you can kind of see what that looks like. So you notice it's a 5-ounce glass of wine. So if you're in a bottle, you should be getting about 5 ounces per the bottle. So hopefully that will help you understand exactly what that looks like. I always joke around that I only had 1 glass because somebody kept refilling it. That one is really just a 5-ounce glass of wine for most individuals. Let me find my slide on this one real quick. So women will be looking at 1 to 2 glasses, men roughly the same, maybe a little bit more. I know it's unfair, but that's the way it goes. But yes, you can include alcohol typically in the evenings. Generally, you want to focus on having it with a meal too. all right? Because we want to make sure we're getting those calories balanced out with regular food as well, okay? Right. So number 4, be active naturally. What does that mean? It means you don't have to join a gym. I go to the gym for specific purposes, but you don't have to. Most everything you can do is around the house, and you may have learned that during this quarantine. Walking, how many people did you see in your neighborhood that you never saw before, right? All of a sudden, all these people are around that you didn't know even existed. That's because they're getting out, doing what they need to do, getting out, and they're not distracted anymore, right? They're trying to get out and do some other fun stuff. They probably have more time on their hands. Maybe the commute's not there. So these are great ways to get active without actually having to do a gym. There's no need for it. Just make sure you're setting realistic goals. That's the main piece with this is if you haven't been walking, don't start trying to run. Just gradually break into it slowly. If anybody's familiar with the Couch to 5K app, it's an online app that basically shows you how to go from really being stationary to even running a 5K. It walks you through it. You don't have to start real fast. It tells you everything you need to do. And a lot of that is meant to get your bones and your muscles moving in the right way without creating a lot of undue stress on them. So it's a very nice little tool to have to get you moving a little bit. So we kind of figured it out, right? What lies beneath is really the most important piece of this. We covered a lot of nutrition. We looked at what the diets look like, but by itself, it's not effective. Neither is exercise alone, and neither is going to see somebody about it. All of it has to go into play. Both physical restoration, cognitive, emotional restoration should be included to generate the best success for you. Spend time on the other parts to create the whole. This iceberg is a great analogy for that, because a lot of what we see on the surface, and a lot of that's physical, just what we feel and what we feel like we look like, has this whole other piece underneath it that's weighing us down, that's creating all the challenges for us. Be it caregiving, being in a different situation, be it the pandemic, whatever it is, it's usually under the surface, and we got to tap into that to figure out what's going on. So what else did these people in the blue zones do? They try to reduce stress. They live generally a slower style life and with less obligation. So obviously that's going to help. And our situations are going to be different in sometimes with that, because you are caregivers and you have obligations from a kid standpoint, spouse, grandparent, loved one, whatever the case may be. This is a hard one to wrap our heads around, but it's something we have to do. So how can we do that? Set kind goals to help minimize that stress. It's a staircase approach, right? If we thought about walking up to the top of the Capitol and seeing that end goal, it's way up there. It's better to use each little flight and think in terms of how you're progressing to get to the top. So smaller approach. Progress, not perfection. That's a hard one to overcome. I'm a perfectionist by nature. Progress, not perfection. Take the baby steps and adjust your expectations as they come. It's not, everything is a learning experience. It's not a failure. It's an opportunity to learn from it and figure out a different way to do it. Get the right support. Let's see, these people in these areas, let me see, I think it's, there we go. The Okinawans. So the ones from Japan had moais, and those are groups of 5 individuals that they committed to for life. Just their friends. So their friend network is smaller than what we typically see in our Facebook world, right? How many friends do you have in your Facebook world? A ton. But how many of those can you call your true friends? It's a way smaller circle, a much smaller circle. And so the circles of these people who are living longer have a much more manageable population of friends that they can count on. And a lot of times, as we'll see in a minute, they're like-minded as well, right? That's your truest circle, like-minded friends who have the same kind of goals, maybe even going through the same challenges. I think of this group, this Lunch and Learn group, as one of those, right? There are people here that have the same mentality that you do, and they're great to have as your true good friends. How about a sense of belonging? That's very important as well. I'll share in a minute some of the challenges that we have with that. It is something that's very difficult. This really comes from a faith-based aspect, and not necessarily a denominational faith, but a group of people that feel like they belong to another group of people, and a spiritual aspect of this. That might be painting, that might be going for walks, that might be nature. It's just a spiritual connection that people have. It adds 4 to 14 years of life expectancy for you. And that is people that attend faith-based groups 4 times a month. They have a sense of belonging. So remember, we got a smaller circle of friends that we connect with, and this sense of belonging. So spiritual belonging is very important in your overall health. And you guys might have experienced that without being able to do some of those things during this pandemic, not being able to go to these functions of faith or otherwise. We all have an innate need for belonging. All right, and family first. Family always comes first. I'll share in a minute a little bit about my story with this, because this is a challenge, especially where divorce is so rampant. The people that live longest have a committed life partner a lot of times. It lowers disease if you're nearby your family, and it gives you another circle of friends that you can count on. They're just called family, right? That you can get support. We know it's an interesting dynamic. It's a very difficult one from all the avenues of blended families and so forth. So it does create some challenges for us. But a sense of family, having that is a big part of this. I have a real small family. I married a woman who has a real large family, full of Italians. They want to be in all my business. So I kind of got what I asked for in certain ways, coming from my small family of really me just being an only child and having a half brother 15 years later. So my little family was really small. To go to this really big family was really interesting for me. But it does give you a sense of belonging, and a sense of you've got people there to support you. And as I mentioned, sense of purpose. Sense of purpose is, I think, one of the founding things for us as people to really feel good about ourselves, to really thrive. And a lot of times we lose that with life, as I mentioned earlier, with the sacred sphere. We lose that a lot. My grandfather had dementia. My grandmother passed away of heart disease. I went through a really rough spell in 2016. I was in the middle of the divorce when the flood happened. And that sense of purpose will drift away the more obstacles you have in front of you. You've got a loved one dealing with dementia. You know what I'm talking about. You know these challenges that come up. That picture on the right with all the little squiggly things is a picture of my house with worms that were coming up from the flood. So my house flooded. I mean, just a really crazy time. And this picture is ingrained in my brain. I keep it with me all the time as a reminder of what the heck was going on there in my life. We've got to step back sometimes, and when we have these obstacles, it's going to take some time to build back up. As I mentioned, I'm remarried now, and there's my beautiful family with my dietitian wife and all of our girls. Yes, a house full of girls. I'm in trouble. But it's taken some time. We've kind of turned the corner on finding that sense of purpose. I used to do a lot of artwork. You might see the picture behind me. I did that one during the flood. In fact, it was inspired by the flood. I've since turned it into some other pieces, as you see there, with the Mardi Gras themes on it. And now we're set again with 2020 throwing us a lot of curveballs. So staying grounded is very important. If you've not been doing your sense of purpose. If you did things before that you're not doing now because of life, try and find those again. I promise it will make you happier. Just carve out a little time for those things, and you'll be amazed about how you feel. And you add that in with your nutrition, things can really turn around for you. So I would like to open this up for questions. If anybody has any questions for me, I would love to hear it, both from the Pearl level and also nutrition and well-being.
All right, so if anybody has any questions, you can pop them in the chat box if you want. Okay, we got one, Chris, for you. From Anne, what are some unhealthy brain foods?
Unhealthy brain foods. So that diet really focuses on a lot of fruits that they feel a little bit more inflammatory. They really want you to stick with more of the berries that have more of the phytochemicals and nutrients that are essential for brain health. So that's typically where they're going. Some other ones that we're really already know, and all three of the diets really want us to stay away from, are saturated fats. So that is your animal sourced fats. From the higher fat standpoint, you want to choose leaner beefs if you're choosing beef, fried foods, and unfortunately some of those really sweet foods that are high in sugar. Those would be typically the inflammatory foods that we're looking at. Thank you, Anne.
Okay, we have another one. This is from Rebecca. She says, kind of silly nutrition question. How do you feel about popcorn? It's usually a go-to snack for me.
Popcorn is good. I think it's a really good, one of the nice things about popcorn is I think that 6 cups of popped popcorn is a serving. Of course, watching the salt that we put on it and also the extra butter are the tricky parts of that. But popcorn in itself is a really good snack food, especially if you're able to microwave it.
I think that's a good question, Rebecca. And we have one. Can you clarify on what are linguine?
Yes, so those are your beans and other bean-like pieces. So like your red beans, black beans, all those will be the beans that we'll be talking about as far as really being a good protein source, having good amounts of fiber on them as well. And then when you mix them with the rice, we call that a complete protein. So the bean adds certain amounts of amino acids to it. The rice will add amino acids, which create those building blocks of protein for us. And when we mix those together, they really go a long way in, number one, keeping us full, adding a lot of fiber and nutrition to our diet. So yeah, beans, split peas, any of those things will be in those categories.
Thank you. And Chris, I have a question that you mentioned the other day from the Pearl standpoint as the sponsor for this event. Can you talk a little bit about the sensory room that you guys have there and how you use that to help your residents too?
That is a great question, or a great look into. So the residents here at the Pearl, this speaks to number 9 about thriving, right? This is sense of purpose. A big goal for people with dementia is finding sense of purpose. And for some of the residents who have cognitively declined, where they're not as engaged, they're not going to be able to do crafts anymore. We still want to find things for them to be able to enjoy and do. The sensory room that I got to put in while we were dealing with this pandemic is a great room that has lights, it has textures, it has aromatherapy in it, sounds, to really explore their senses. What we find with the light, if you pull in comforting colors like blues and greens, it helps somebody relax. If you pull in reds, it helps gets them energized. You've got somebody with sundowners, the greens and the blues work, but also the pink colors work. So we can change that whole room into a nice calming area. Even the RCAs, the people that we work with here, that work with the loved ones, they love going in that room, and it's just like, oh, this is so relaxing. It just gives you a nice little escape, and gives them plenty of things to look at, maybe touch and feel, but where they're not really able to do the artwork or fold towels or anything anymore, it gives them that sense of purpose and an activity to do.
Great, thank you. We have another question too. A couple more. It says, this is from Rebecca. She says, there's so many oils on the market now besides just canola or vegetable oil, coconut, avocado, etc. It's overwhelming. What's your best option for oil?
I still like olive oil. I think some of the high heat oils like avocado oil really go well with like salmon. It really depends on the purpose of cooking. I had taken a picture of this because I want to include it for you guys as well when I discuss the recipe. This is one of my favorites, especially for salads. So you can find this oil at Rouse's. And well, actually, let me take that back. You can find flavored oils, especially like a lemon olive oil like this one is, at most places. Red Stick Spice, most of these grocery stores have it as well. This one I chose because of the top. Can you see it? It's got a built-in spout. It's a life changer. So I don't have to worry about spilling it. I don't have to worry about putting too much. It's a good product that you can find. Rouse's and I think Alexander's Market, if you live off in the Highland area, they both carry it. It's great to just be able to put on a salad. Just nice and light. So yeah, I think, you know, coconut oil is kind of turning some heads here and there. I think everything in moderation, especially from an oil perspective, is the way to go, but I still lean towards olive oil unless you're cooking, and then maybe I would put in something more like an avocado or even a coconut oil.
Thank you. Couple more questions for you.
Sure.
How can a home caregiver create sensory experiences?
Everything in that room, and so I'll have to share this room. If you visit the Pearl at Jamestown page, you'll get a sneak peek of it, and then we're going to have an open house as soon as we're able to get fully open again. But everything I bought for that sensory room, I got off of Amazon. The whole room was really reasonable to buy. I really like what's known as a bubble tube. So a bubble tube is a tube. Man, let me see. I want to see if I can just play the video this way for you. That might help. So that is just a little jellyfish area that has water in it. There's the bubble tube I was talking about. Those are little lights that you can change the colors to. The residents can hold them. These lights themselves. And then the ceiling has lights on it as well. You can change the color of it, whatever color you want. One you like the best? And these are just simple LED lights that I have behind the sheet.
Ah, that is nice. I agree.
And the goal for all these rooms is to not think about what your experience and what it should be. It's about how they interact with the room. Because they're so creative, they find their own ways to have fun. So they love to ask questions. How do those jellyfish eat? What do you feed them? Everything that you see there, I just picked off of Amazon. If y'all would like a list of some of these things, I'll be glad to share it with you. So that's based off of the concept of a snoozelen room. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's SNOEZELEN. And those are thousands of dollar rooms that are set up a lot of times for autistic children, but it really has the same effect in helping people with dementia. But this is a much lower cost that you can actually implement in your house.
That's great. Couple more questions.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on sugar substitutes such as Truvia, stevia, etc.? Are diet drinks a good substitute for regular soft drinks?
All right. So yes, that is another really good question as well. So both my wife and I, well, my wife uses them. I don't, but it's a preference thing. no, there's no true studies that have come out to show them as being harmful. So I think you have to just really weigh what you like with that. I generally prefer sugar. My wife will sometimes use Splenda. Now, you can be affected from a GI perspective with using some of these. So you have to watch them and use them in moderation. It's good to notice if you're having like stomach cramps, gas, bloating. Some of these will act up and interfere with the way your digestive tract works, but that's a sensitivity thing. It's not necessarily because it's bad for you. It's just your body is not able to handle the level of sensitivity that those products bring into your body.
Great. And we have one more question. What foods can you encourage diabetics who don't like vegetables or fruits?
Yes. So, well, it would depend. So what I always like to do is say, what do you like? And we see if we can figure out how to incorporate that, because there's no sense in even bothering with the can't pieces. So I would sit down and basically say, what foods do I like that aren't going to raise my blood sugar? Maybe it's just a matter of just making sure it's a more balanced meal. So a carbohydrate with a meat and a fat source. The fat source will help slow the absorption down of the carbohydrates that you consume and help regulate the blood sugar. And of course, smaller meals. The vegetables and fruit piece is really going to be more about getting the nutrients you need. So it'd be nice to incorporate that in, but you can still manage your blood sugar if you're not having too many of those.
Awesome. I think that is it for our questions as of now. Thank you, Chris. This was an awesome presentation. And just another thank you to our sponsors for this week, the Pearl at Jamestown, the Blake at the Grove, and Garden View for helping to make this week possible. And thank you to everyone who has joined in at any point. And again, thanks, Chris. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate all y'all do. Caregivers, y'all are amazing. If you need any support from me, other resources, please let me know.
Thank you. And I'll be sure to get all that out to y'all in an email, to the information from Chris.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.